There are 192 nations on the face of this globe. Not one of those 192 nations, including Ukraine, is a threat to Russia. Now, regardless, the Russian military is continuing to wage a full-scale war on the nation and the people of Ukraine. I'm not sure the reasons because I don't know Putin. The highest I've been in the leadership of Russia was once or twice in my life having a meeting with Mr. Lavrov, the foreign minister. But I think when it comes to Putin, he's got to satisfy his ego, or he's sick, or maybe both. The Ukrainian military and civilians are fighting for their homes, and obviously they want to be an independent nation. They have our moral support and even some of our weapons, and they probably need a lot more help from the United States, short of putting troops in that country. I wish we'd gotten them more defensive weapons before this invasion, and I still think there's more that we can do. I'm an original co-sponsor of the NIAT bill. NIAT is the word for no in the Russian. And it's literally this legislation that goes by this acronym, NIAT Act, literally says no to Russian aggression with tough, targeted, and support for Ukrainian resistance efforts, even if that turns into a guerrilla war and a number of other bills to crush the Putin regime. Russia, as we know, is a major oil and gas producer. So Putin's actions are hurting not just Ukrainian and Russian citizens, but Americans as well. Just think of the $1 or more increase in the price of gasoline we're paying today compared to 1 year ago. This situation comes at the same time Americans across the country are already paying more for the gas than at any time since 2014, and that dollar adds up or comes from AAA data. Last night, I was encouraged to hear President Biden pledge to, quote, use every tool at our disposal, end of quote, to limit gas price hikes after he imposed sanctions on Russia. So it is time for Congress and the White House to rethink policies that threaten our energy independence and at the same time our national security. That's why already this week I have helped to introduce the American Energy Independence Act with Senator Hawley that would reverse the president's shutdown of the energy sector and return to full protection. So we would have energy independence like we did until 12 months ago. Last year, the president talked about buying American products. Last night, I should say, he talked about that. Yet, it seems like oil and natural gas, very major components of our economy, were excluded from his rhetoric. When it comes to oil, the United States imports nearly 700,000 barrels of oil a day from Russia. That's why I introduced legislation yesterday with Senator Marshall that would ban purchases of Russian oil. I'm also backing a new bill by Senator Rubio to make American oil companies sever ties with Russian state oil and gas companies, as many of these companies already have done. I support harsh sanctions that hit Putin where it really hurts him, and in turn, you affect the entire Russian people, which they're innocent of this dictators running their country, all the harm he's causing them right now. But we ought to free the world from Russian energy blackmail and keep gas affordable here at home with American-produced energy. Some of my colleagues are looking to lower prices at the gas pump by pushing for a gas tax freeze. That would be a very short-term, unsustainable move that would blow a hole in a highway trust fund. Instead, I hope colleagues on both sides of the aisle can work with the President to reverse decisions that have increased the price of domestic fuel production. You remember, on the first day in office, President Biden decided to shut down the Keystone Pipeline. President Biden should restart and expedite that pipeline. Also, in January 2021, President Biden issued an executive order pausing new oil and gas leases on public lands and federal waters. In July 2021, the Interior Department halted all oil drilling on leased land within the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Now take all these actions, signal to capital investors that the heavy hand of the federal government will work against fossil fuels investments at every turn. You know, you read about bank regulators all the time discouraging banks from making loans to energy fossil fuels. This hostile regulatory environment has crippled investment in fossil fuels, which in turn is the reason we have a high price of gasoline. Instead of more red tape, the President and Congress should work to cut regulations and federal permitting that slow down and has slowed down domestic energy production. We were, as you know, energy independent 12 months ago. Now we are energy dependent. We have the President begging OPEC and Russia to ship us more oil. Policies that encourage investment in fossil fuel production will increase domestic production, and the result would be lower gas prices, just like we can look back in the last 12 months, and all the action that's been taken has driven up the price of gasoline. But instead of focusing on domestic energy independence last fall, as I've already referred to, President Biden instead asked OPEC to pump more oil. The OPEC cartel, of course, did not honor that request. In 2000, when he was a senator, now President Biden acknowledged that anti-competitive behavior from OPEC harms American consumers and called on President Clinton to consider legal action against OPEC. OPEC is an organization which blatantly colludes to raise the price of oil. I have introduced the bipartisan bill entitled No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels. It goes by the acronym NOPEC, which would allow the Department of Justice to hold OPEC accountable for its anti-competitive behaviors that artificially inflate global oil prices. I ask again for President Biden to publicly support the passage of NOPEC and work with Congress to pass this legislation into law. Besides focusing on fossil fuels, we know that ethanol makes up 10% of the gas sold in the United States. When oil prices are high, it gives higher blends of ethanol a clear competitive advantage. Historically, gas prices gradually rise in the spring and peak late summer when people are driving more frequently. But last fall, the Supreme Court rejected EPA's regulation allowing year-round E15 sales. Congress must move quickly to ensure that E15 can be sold this summer. E15 is a cleaner, higher octane type of gasoline that contains more homegrown ethanol and less petroleum. Both biodiesel and ethanol are proven domestic supplies of fuel that enhance our energy independence and at the same time lower greenhouse gas emissions. Domestic biofuel producers are ready to step up and to give consumers lower gas prices that increase our national security and provide jobs in the heartland, good-paying jobs. Most Americans do not care where the oil was produced when they fill up their gas tanks. They just want to fill up their gas tanks without taking out a loan to do it. But when conflict occurs in oil-producing regions around the world, Americans quickly realize the importance of your gas being a mix of West Texas crude and Iowa ethanol. In just over a year, we can see how the United States, is losing energy independence. Instead of focusing on domestic fuel production, the President and his administration have caved to the most radical environmentalists in shaping our energy policy. It's time to reverse course. I'm taking the President at his word when he said in his State of the Union address last night that he wants to use every tool at his disposal to limit gas price hikes. So I have just given several ways that we can use every tool that the President's talking about. And of course, it's time to get to work. I yield the floor.